The reason I say that, what does that have to do with fear? What it has to do with fear was when challenges would arise, there's a big part of me that has this collaboration and this contribution focus and this need to be a part of a team. But in that industry, there's this hierarchy and there's a chain of command, not just in the military, but even in industry, there's a chain of command. And that's the person who provides the answer. And my instinct was, I really think we ought to collaborate about this because you're just as smart as I am. You're a couple years younger than me and a little bit junior in the program, but you went through the same training I went through. You probably have a perspective on this. Yeah, that was my instinct, but I had to suppress that. And I was being forced in a very stressful and anxiety inducing way to make decisions for people and not letting them choose for themselves. That was very incongruent with who I was as a person. So learn.
All right, we're alive. So excited to do this. For those who are jumping on or listening to this or catching on with this, this is actually one of the first times I'm doing this live public facing on, at least on my podcast. I'm super excited to have Charles on the podcast. Charles and I met at a recent event. Charles is a coach too. He's a leadership coach, peak performance coach. He will talk about it in a little bit. But really, our intention is to add a lot of value to you as you're listening to this. And we're talking about fear and fortitude in the current times. There's lots of uncertainty right now in the air around the economy, what's happening around the politics, and especially in the Western Hemisphere. And that can create a lot of social instability in so many different ways. Sometimes social instability is at a bigger level, but I'm more concerned about what happens in people's personal lives and team meetings and core teams, executive teams, and your own leadership team with your business partners and your home team with your family, because it tends to trickle down, and that fear can create all kinds of problems. It can affect how you hire, how you lead your team, whether personal or professional, your business, how you move it forward. The bottom line is going to affect so many things, your investments that you're taking care of. And that includes, we're entrepreneurs, that affects us too, and we're going through the same fears and so many things that come with it. How are we navigating it? And I want this to be a candid conversation around how is it affecting us? How are we navigating it? And how are our clients navigating it? How are we supporting other leaders to move forward in the direction of courage, strategy, and powerful decision making that leads to a better future for their businesses, for their family, for their team, for their community? And so you're going to gain a lot out of this conversation. There's very little planned. We're high performers. We find ways to navigate conversations and give you the best out of it. This is going to be completely live, unfiltered. We might completely disagree on all kinds of things or completely agree. We don't know what's going to come up. So stay tuned for conflict or no conflict. It's like a hockey game, and you might see a fight in the middle of it somewhere. But I'm super excited to have you over, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, of course. I think this is a digitally safe space, though. I don't see us coming to blows. I don't anticipate that.
You might be surprised. I've done that on podcasts. No, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Yeah. We'll start this off with a couple of stories around where are we coming from, what our intention is, how do we support people, so you understand where the information is coming from. And I'll start with Charles. Charles, great to have you on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you serve people.
Oh, thank you. Professionally speaking, I started my career 17, 18 years old, enlisted in the Navy, and I was lucky enough to be selected for the nuclear power program. So I spent 8 years in the Navy on 3 separate fast attack submarines serving as a nuclear power plant operator. And so there's quite a bit of stress and high performance that goes along with that. You can imagine we're the engineering equivalent of the Navy SEALs, basically a very, very elite group, a very, very highly trained, specifically around the space of decision making, human performance, error reduction. It really just peak performance in that knowledge space, which is part of the reason I think you and I connected so well. After my tour, I joined the commercial nuclear power industry, continued that level of operation and continued that level of training, increasing roles of responsibility like anyone would expect. I served with a couple of different utilities and then went to work for Westinghouse and General Electric, part of their project management development program, part of their leadership development programs. So along the way, that high consequence, high stakes environment has been bred into me, for the past 40 odd years. And what I recognized later in my life and throughout my leadership development and my leadership journey was the biggest contributor to my success was how well I was able to lead and recognize the potential of others on my team and help develop them. So, a big part of my practice has been working with high consequence, high stakes leaders. Yes, engineering, technology, medical, aviation, finance, because those industries have some critical decisions, some irreversible decisions, and some irreversible spaces where our decisions matter much differently than they would in other industries where you get to iterate and kind of try things out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love that you come from that space, and we come from such different backgrounds. I didn't come from the army world, Navy world. I come from the simple homegrown problem child world, where and then many of you might know that as I've shared my story, is that I struggled a lot in my 20s with addiction and around all kinds of things until a moment where I completely broke down. And I think it was God's grace that pulled me out of that, because a lot of people didn't. I don't like to make it look like, oh, I pulled myself up. I could have gone the other direction very easily. And I think I was given a second chance, and that started my journey to understand what went wrong in the process. I grew up in a good family, great values, religious, but something went wrong in the process. And over the past 20 years, I've kind of delved into what could I improve. And about 12 years ago or so, my mentor coach took me through a process for 6 months, and it completely rewired how I showed up as a human being, as a leader, and it completely changed my life. And my first question was, why didn't I go through that before? Was that even available? And of course it was available, but not in my circle. And I needed a kind of support that was not there. And that also became a big part of my mission, to serve people at that level. And so the past decade, I jumped towards building a business as a coach, and I've helped lots of people, 16,000 hours sessions done at this point. And I've worked with leaders in all kinds of environments, whether they be parents or stay-at-home moms, who I consider are great leaders because they shape the future, and executives, entrepreneurs, founders, teams, community, a whole community I've worked with along with my team to help them heal and move through and actually build a better community, families I've worked with. And always I find that its bottom line is a leadership problem, is that the problems flow from top down, not bottom up.
Yep.
And unfortunately, most leaders don't take responsibility, and a lot of times they struggle because they're human beings, including me. I struggle in a lot of areas. So we'll dive in and talk about one of the biggest things that shows up in our life, which is fear. And fear is a necessary part of our psychology, our biology. It helps us stay safe and protected. But then if you're building a business, if you're moving an organization forward, if you're moving a family, a community forward, you will need to build lots of things to be able to deal with that fear in a way so it helps you grow. It helps your team grow. It helps your company grow. It helps you show up as a better leader. And that side is the side of fortitude. It's the side of courage. It's the side of strategic thinking. It doesn't happen when we are in fear. And right now we're in a situation, and the whole world is dealing with it pretty much, especially if you're in the Western world, in US, Canada. You see the effect of what's happening with the economy, with the political situation. It's trickling down to day-to-day life for everybody, even if you don't have a business, even if you are not involved in the investing world. But especially if you're involved in there, I can almost 100% say that you're dealing with some effect of that in your personal life, but also in your business and investments. And we want to dive deep into what's going on in there. So I'll let Charles take the wheel a little bit. Like, you've worked with high stake leaders.
Yeah.
where do we get started with this theme around fear in the current economy, and how do we even approach it? Where is the starting point in your perspective?
Yeah, for me, addressing fear has always come down to the inside out conversation. A lot of people, I think we might have had this conversation once already. Most people look at fear from an external perspective, right? We know we're trying to protect ourselves. You teed it up very, very well. But what we do is we try to treat that internal fear through external stuff. And just broadly speaking, we spend time and money and effort to figure out a way to avoid or bypass our fear instead of spending the time and the energy and the effort to look that fear square in the face and really assess it. Fear is an emotional response. There's a little bit of a scale there, small fear, big fear, but ultimately the physiological response is the same. It's a threat. And so we shut down. Your example, you have no creativity, you have no abundance, you have no chance of solving a problem in a fear state because all your thinking goes right back here to the back of your head and the top of your neck. It goes to that survival instinct, goes to that reptilian brain that says fight, flight, or freeze. That's it. Those are your only three options if you're trying to make decisions and lead a team from fear. You're going to make one of those three decisions. And so when I work with leaders, one of the first things we absolutely have to do is who the heck are you? Because when we ask leaders that, they immediately start kind of spewing out the resume. Well, I do this for these people, and it's titles and it's roles. And yes, I get that. Those are important parts of our identity. But who are you really at your core and at your base is the only place to start this conversation of what are your true fears and how do we address them? Because for many leaders, what ends up happening is a little bit of fear, a little bit of threat to the organization, to my business, to something. The way the brain processes that is my ego, my status, my title, my role. And so that may or may not necessarily be the best framework to move forward to solve problems for a larger organization or to think strategically in a stressful moment.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So you remind me of a story. So there was a Zen master who was sitting in a garden. If you know Zen masters, they're very spiritual, present. They don't care about your status, any of that stuff. So there's an army general that walked in and that came towards the garden, and the Zen master looks at him. He has all these, like he has his uniform and everything, and he looks at me. He says, "Who are you?" And because they're direct, he's like, "Oh, I'm the general of so and so, and I came from this town." He's like, "No, no, no, I mean, who are you?" And then he starts giving his resume, like you said, and then he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." It's like then they have a conversation around something else, and after the conversation, while the general was leaving, the Zen master makes a joke, and the general starts laughing hysterically. And he's like, "There you are."
There you are.
So
Yep.
he's hiding behind his status and all
Yep.
that stuff. But
Yep.
let's break that down. What do we mean by who a leader is really at their core, and how does that impact how they show up, react to fear, or handle it?
Yeah. So what I've learned, given my industry and given the brief background that I gave, there's a very specific framework for success in that space. Okay, as you can imagine, just in general terms, very risk adverse, very detail oriented, right? If you want to be successful in that field and in that industry, you have to espouse those values. You have to demonstrate your capacity and your acumen for showing up in that space in that way. Okay, I am not complaining. I had a very good career. It was a very lucrative career. It was incredibly rewarding and enriching, only because one of my innate drives is growth and knowledge. So that space in particular gave me a ton of opportunity to learn and learn and learn and grow and grow. That's terrific. There was a big part of who I am, a big part of my personality that needed to be suppressed in order to play that role. So when I moved into leadership positions, playing a role, my instinct was this, my experience was that. And so my leadership, I kind of had this career trajectory, and then all of a sudden as a leader it really plateaued, and then I started to lose credibility. I started to lose energy. I started to lose focus. I just didn't love the work anymore. And it wasn't because anything about the job had changed. What had changed was I no longer fit in that role and in that box. The reason I say that, what does that have to do with fear? What it has to do with fear was when challenges would arise, there's a big part of me that has this collaboration and this contribution focus and this need to be a part of a team. But in that industry, there's this hierarchy and there's a chain of command, not just in the military, but even in industry, there's a chain of command. And that's the person who provides the answer. And my instinct was, I really think we ought to collaborate about this because you're just as smart as I am. You're a couple years younger than me and a little bit junior in the program, but you went through the same training I went through. You probably have a perspective on this. Yeah, that was my instinct, but I had to suppress that, and I was being forced in a very stressful and anxiety inducing way to make decisions for people and not letting them choose for themselves. That was very incongruent with who I was as a person. So, learning that about myself and understanding my authentic identity and recognizing that humor and fun and collaboration and adventure are a big part of who I am. Okay, how does that mean that I can't be that in this role? And for some of us, that's true. So for some of us, it's completely incompatible. This is the wrong career for me. This is the wrong position for me, whatever the case may be. I can't reconcile those. For me, I had an opportunity to reconcile those. And I say, you know what? Forget the old mold. I need to break that mold and I need to be my authentic self and my authentic leader. Since I've made that change, exponential growth. Exponential growth for me, for my organizations, for my teams at the time, exponential. Because there's a gap in that structure and in the old mold and in the old way of doing things. And I'm lucky enough to just show up as a really authentic leader, and it served me very, very well. When faced with challenges and fear and threat, I had this whole team behind me supporting me. Instead of them being what I had perceived previously as a liability, they became my most powerful asset. I'll pause there because I could just keep going.
Yeah, I love the transition to authenticity, and I mean it's one of those pop words nowadays that I want to be authentic, but most people don't actually know in their experience what that shows up.
Yep.
A lot of times people, it's funny, such an internal process becomes an external show. They'll be like, well, if I'm dressed this way, I will look authentic, or if I
Yeah.
have this kind of tattoo, or if I show these kind of behaviors, I will look authentic, or some other weird thing that people do. But really, one of the core frameworks that I've learned around this, I learned this from Dr. Gabor Mate, and there are two powerful forces within us. There's the need for attachment and the need for authenticity. Every human being,
Yep.
doesn't matter where you come from, these are your core biological needs, which means the need for attachment is that when you are born, especially in a human family, you rely heavily on your parents and on your little tribe for survival. You can't do anything. Human beings are born completely without any kind of ability to take care of themselves, versus a horse. Even a horse who's a mammal, the baby can walk around, run around on the first day. Human
Yeah.
babies cannot. And then that's connected to our biology, because if we're actually born 3 months ahead, otherwise we wouldn't even fit through the canal. So that forces our psychology to be very dependent on our parents for survival. So we constantly seek for approval and understanding, and because if we don't, then our psychology and biology translate that to death. And
Yep.
that's what it happens. And then the problem is that needs to kind of move on. If we are in a growth environment, or a community or a tribe understands that, no, this person needs to become a contributor, a leader in the community. But the problem is that our training is exactly that way. It's an attachment training, is that
Yeah.
from childhood, there's like, you need to get approval from your parents, and it's like that's pushed on you. And then the teachers come, then your peer group come. You're constantly trying to adapt to that environment, and you're sharing that with the business world. Very similar story. But then authenticity is very different. That part of us That's if you are ever around children, if your child is 2 years old, or if you ever seen a 2-year-old child, try getting them to tie their laces, helping them with that, and you'll find out what the authenticity is. They'll be like, no, I'm
Yeah,
gonna do this. They won't let you because there's a need to grow, there's a need to be independent, there's a need to
yeah,
expand, and that's built into us. And there's those two forces constantly fighting. And if you are somebody growing in any environment, now you're in a leadership position, most of the time leaders are in that position because of their skill sets that they have gained in that environment, the hard skills, and then
right.
they get promoted. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a leader. It just means that they are just well suited because of the time and right place and comfort, and they're in that position. But it doesn't mean you're a leader. Even if entrepreneurs who say like, I'm going to show up, build a business, or I'm going to move this business to the next level, they're not going to be that, and they're going to struggle. And a lot of it is because they're trying to fit in, they're trying to seek approval, they're not pushing, they're not challenging, they're not pushing the boundaries.
Right.
And as soon as attachment comes, there's fear,
Yep.
because you don't want to die. I'll
Yep.
pause there. I want to know where
Yeah, no,
that.
I'm with you 1,000%. I mean, I framed it a little bit differently with respect to we all want to be a part of a group. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we're accepted by that group, our next priority is to attain status within that group,
Yeah.
right? Better food, better sleeping conditions, better mates, like that. That's our drive, right? And so, yeah, threaten anything that has to do with your status within that group, and you're going to see some fear-based activities. And I personally don't think money is the root of all evil. I think fear is. I think
Mm-hmm.
fear, all bad behavior stems from fear. When people make
Mm-hmm.
bad decisions and they snap at people and they say nasty things, they act passive aggressively, whatever that is, all that bad behavior, in my experience, directly observed, is because someone is trying to satiate some kind of fear. They're
Yeah.
making short-term decisions that say, they're just trying to address that fear and quell that fear.
And let's, I want to go deeper, a little bit deeper into it. I actually, yesterday I was telling Charles I did 2 group sessions in my community for investors and entrepreneurs on fear. It was okay, we've talked about your value around freedom, what that looks like, but let's go, what's stopping you from the process? Fear is a big topic in there, but it's interesting. English language, pretty much any language, but specifically English language, has very interesting terms that cover fear. And it was my coach who pointed this out to me. And when I would say, I'm stressed out about this, that, I'm like, why are you saying stressed out? He's like, what do you mean by stressed out? Like, it sounds like you're afraid. Like, no, I'm stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. It's like, no, that's all fear. That's just cover words for fear. Call a
Yeah.
spade a spade. So
Yep.
we call them all fear, all kinds of things. I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm in paralysis analysis, I'm procrastinating. All are terms for that. And then it covers the real thing. And when I was going through the session yesterday and we were kind of uncovering it, and they're like, you could see some things are clicking. You go, oh shit, I never connected that to be fear. And language is very powerful. It can completely hide the real experience because you're
Yep.
calling it something that it's not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's a key breakthrough with most people, is getting them. Firstly, if you want to use a word, I'm not going to make you pick another word, but I'm definitely going to make you define that word. Just
Yeah.
had a conversation 45 minutes ago with someone who was talking about success. My partner and I both want success. We both want to be successful. And I said, yeah, but
Hmm.
there's a Venn diagram there somewhere where your definition of success and their definition of success overlaps
Yeah.
somewhere. When things are good, that's the overlap. But all this other stuff that you're talking about is the difference between your definition and their definition. And they have
Yeah.
wildly differing for the same word. I'm with you 1,000%. Distinction and specificity is so important, especially at the top, because one of your most important roles as a leader is communicating in a very specific, unambiguous way.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm working with a company right now, and the biggest, and I see this, another consultant sees this, a bunch of people see it, but the heads of the company don't see it yet. We're going through that process, and we can see that this company could grow 10x in the next few years if they make one decision, not 100 different decisions. and we're trying to see how we can, and behind it, it looks like there are so many strategic challenges, process challenges all over, but behind it, and I actually met with a bunch of the leaders in the company, and the ones who actually see it, and like there's only one problem. There's a hesitation to move forward, and the hesitation is that somebody's afraid here to make that decision,
Yeah.
and those decisions are risky because you're making a company-wide declaration, and that's what makes it so, partially because it is risky to make decisions in any frame, especially in the business world. If
Yeah.
you're in the investing world, in the business world, in the current economy, you're making decisions for you, for your family, for your community, whoever, for your team. It is a risky decision normally, and that's what, but there's also a bigger output on the other side. That's what makes business is a bigger
Yep.
opportunity. But now there's a bigger risk for most people, how they're perceiving everything that's going on, when the reality might not be that. But you might be one decision away from 10xing your business and life, but the thing that might be preventing you is the thing that you're kind of hiding behind it. Oh, well, I don't think this is the right time to go in this direction. Or when you look at the economy, and this is like what we hide behind words a lot of times. So what we're
Yep.
trying to
Yep.
get you to connect to is get specific, really acknowledge what is in your experience and what is happening objectively. And ultimately, business is two things: peoples and systems. So there will be numbers that are objective, you need to hit those, and then there will be people that are incredibly subjective. It could go in there just like the Charles's diagram is like, your definition of what progress or success or whatever will be very different than the person beside you. And unless you've clarified that and you've brought all the cards on the table and explicitly said, no, I don't want this, I want this, this is what we were looking for, are you aligned with this, can we work together to make this happen towards that mission, that purpose, or not? Which kind of leads me to the next part, is one of the biggest cures outside of what we just mentioned, or the biggest leverage points over fear, is a sense of purpose and mission. And you come from the world of the Navy, and everything is about mission. Everything is about, it's not about you, it's not even about your team, it's about the mission. But most people in day-to-day life, they don't look at it. Even when you're working with companies, like, I'm just doing my job. No, but once mission and purpose and vision comes into the picture, you start to stop being reactionary to the current. You look at the bigger picture. Things change, teams change. What are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of a funny thing because when people ask me about submarine service, they ask me about Navy service, and they say, "Oh man, you had such a great mission." I didn't have the same mission that you think I had. I didn't have a mission of national security and
Yeah.
making the world a safe place. I had the mission of not making this boat sink any more than we intended it to sink. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the very real focus. You want to talk about having 130 guys all focused on the same thing, put them in a
Mhm.
300-foot long tube and sink it.
Yeah.
I've read far too many case studies of one valve, one switch out of position that have caused deaths. So our focus on the day in and day out was very real because the consequences were so high. This could be we could have a whole discussion about risk, because in my world, risk is a big deal. And there's two components to risk that a lot of people, they don't really always talk about both sides of the risk. There's the probability. That's usually what people think about when they think about risk. That's 50-50. That's 80-20. Okay, if the odds are in our favor, then we're going to downplay the risk and we're going to go ahead and do it. But there's another side to that conversation with risk, which is consequence. Because if it's 50-50 with very low consequence, do it. If it's 80-20 with a life or death consequence, nope. There's a 20% chance that you could die. Is that a low enough probability for you? No. I want to get that down to 100% chance that I will not die. So there's two parts to risk. So when you're looking at a decision, the other thing that I want to introduce to the audience too, first thing that I talk to about, any team that's deadlocked and they can't make a decision and they're afraid to move forward, the first thing I ask is, okay, what's the decision, right? Well, it's this. Well, no, no, no. Firstly, again, back to definitions and specificity. Every single time we have to come to an agreement of what the problem statement is, because everybody in the room has a different opinion of what the problem statement is. Get clear. get specific. Make sure everybody is thinking about, talking about, and voting on the exact same problem. Because everybody and a team is kind of supposed to have their own perspective. Well, I'm looking at it from an HR perspective. I'm looking at it from a finance perspective. That's why we create teams. That's necessary. But is everybody defining the problem the same way? And then once you get that agreement, now this is the kicker. Is this a critical decision or a non-critical decision? And the differentiation there is a critical decision cannot be reversed. It cannot be undone. Once you cut that apple, we do not have the power to put that apple back together. Once it's cut, it's cut. So if we decide to cut this apple, that's a critical decision because there's no going back from it. So many times organizations are all wrapped up and they're all frazzled and they got notes all over the board and they got all these initiatives for a decision that isn't even a critical decision. What happens if we make this choice and, an unpopular or an unsavory result happens? And somebody will say, well, then we'll have to just undo it and then we'll just go this way instead. And it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You just spent the last 3 months arguing over this point when you could have made the decision, read the outcome, and then pivoted or adjusted accordingly. For a non-critical decision, what are you afraid of? And I'm not picking what threshold people should have for fear. We all have different threshold. And I think that's another important trait of a good team is a different threshold for fear, for risk. That's necessary. You need someone on the team who's the devil's advocate who says, nope, zero risk. And somebody else on the other team that's like, jump first, we'll figure it out on the way down. That's a great team. That's at least the ingredients for what could be a great team. But first and foremost, before you get yourself way downstream worrying about how to overcome the fear and how to make the decision, go back upstream and say, do we all agree that this is the problem that we're trying to solve? No. Okay, well, let's get a line there. And then of all of our choices, only one of our potential options is a critical, undoable decision. If the others are non-critical, well, does it make sense to try those first?
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. And I love the decision-making criteria and assessing risk and who's on the team. And I want to move a little bit towards, thank you for joining us here for this video. We've noticed that there are a certain percentage or a high percentage of our audience haven't subscribed to our channel. If you can please click on the button to subscribe to the channel, it will help us create more content. It will help us, which will help us reach more amazing people like you to support them, to serve them. So please click on the subscribe button and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye. Most of the people who are going to be listening to this are entrepreneurs with small teams or sometimes on their own. They're moving forward. And there are huge risks in their regard. There are objective risks. And for example, when I started my business 10 years ago, I was supporting a whole family. I had my daughter, I had my wife, and we decided that my wife would be with my daughter. And so I'm responsible for the whole thing. And I also kind of cut the cord. I made a decision on my last career as a mechanical engineer, and I wasn't going to go in that direction. So now I'm left with trying to figure out a new path, a completely new skill set. And I've had knowledge, background, skill set in some ways, but not in the way to create value in the marketplace. And not having zero experience in business, trying to figure that out. That was a risky decision. I knew that objectively, but it was more risky in my experience. My experience of it was that it would, if I didn't control it, it would go out of proportion, that, oh my God, this is gonna, but it wasn't that risky. Objectively was risky in the sense that, hey, I needed to spend 2 to 3 years getting this up and making sure my family's taken care of. That doesn't, and in North America especially, that's not like, nobody's gonna, I wasn't gonna die because of that. My family wasn't gonna die or get hungry. Like, I had the option to go drive Uber, which I decided to do. I didn't want to be in the engineering field because it was going to take a lot of my bandwidth and attention. It looked like a crazy decision for most people. I'm like, no, that's a logical decision for me. And then the second step was learning the skill sets of the new path, but also learning the business piece of it. That in itself is risky. But if I were to describe my experience of it, it felt 100 times more risky than the objective reality of the risk. And I will quote this investor that I love, very successful, Naval Ravikant, who says that, like, most people think it's like, avoid two risks: don't die.
Dying
And
sucks.
it's like, because then you won't be. It's like, don't take risks with your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
If you're trying it, and when it comes to business, you're not going to die. Like, it's just business. And second is avoid complete financial ruin, like complete, where you're kind of, you have no resources, network is
Untouchable. Yeah.
broken down. Like, if you can avoid those two things, you will recover out of pretty much anything else. And a lot of investors, entrepreneurs who are starting out, or they're in the first 5 years of their business, sometimes even 10 years, they are so scared, but they haven't specified what exactly they're scared of, because in their experience, it looks
Yep.
much, it looks like a demon that they cannot they
Right.
cannot even approach. But in objective reality, that's not the case. Maybe we can speak a little bit to that risk.
Oh my gosh, I'm salivating over here because what you're talking about and so this is the unconscious, unaware side of fear that just most people don't understand where their fear comes from. So if you had come to me, and we'll pretend I'm not me because we know my views on entrepreneurialism and taking
Yeah.
risks, but hypothetically, you and I are engineers. You're a mechanical engineer. I'm an electrical engineer. We're working at the same firm, and you come to me and say, "This isn't for me. I think it's really risky to stay here." Most people who pursue engineering and STEM did so for the
Stability.
stability and the certainty of it. Okay. So here's what I'm going to infer from the actions that you took, from the actions that you demonstrated. You are not a certainty driven person. Okay. So you coming to me for advice, let's say I'm the traditional electrical engineer, certainty is the most important thing in the world. Like, get your 401k, get retired, and there you go. And that's what it's about. My advice to you is going to be, well, what are you talking about? Why would you do that? What are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid if I just sit here, I'm wasting my life. Wasting your life? Are you kidding me? And I'm
Yeah.
going to espouse all the reasons why engineering and this firm in particular are the absolute best thing. But it's through my lens of my need for certainty. You have a larger, greater need for uncertainty, variety, excitement. That's how you interpret it. What's important about every single one of us listening is we all have a different emotional needs profile. And if you don't understand or know yet what your emotional needs profile is, you are a slave to it and you don't even know it. Because if your need is for love and connection, most important thing in the world for you, and here's a quick way to check that: open up your phone and see how many contacts you have, and see how many like text strings you have open right now with how many people. And if it's dozens of people, you are love and connection driven. You love that connection. You love to be with people and know what's going on in their life and follow it. If that's your drive, you're not going to go out on your own and become a solopreneur and work by yourself out of your house for the next 3 years to get a business off the ground. You'll lose your mind. That'll scare the crap out of you. You'll create fears and you'll create reasons and justifications why you shouldn't do that. But the real fear isn't taking that action. The real fear is my needs aren't going to be fulfilled. So it still fits the model that we talked about, is like, where does fear come from? Well, we're mammals and we're apes and, being a part of a group and all this. It's the same thing, but we want to be part of a group for different reasons. Some of us want to be a part of that group for the stability and the certainty. Some of us want to be a part of that group for the growth and the knowledge. Some of us want to be a part of that group for the significance. That's kind of a shared experience, shared human experience. But in business, if you don't know what your needs are, then you're making up fears to protect the fulfillment of those needs, and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. I love that it's going to the foundations of what we need as human beings. And a lot of people wouldn't even think of the need for certainty or uncertainty, or the need for freedom, because we look at them as like privileges and luxuries.
Right.
But the reality is that, and I agree with the part around, when I was starting out, for example, my business, I had a huge need to break out of whatever I was in. There was a huge need for my version of whatever that freedom looked like.
Yep.
There was a
Yep.
huge necessity. So I was able to override a lot of the overwhelm and fear that came, because I had a vision for what really mattered to me, and there was a need connected to it. And I want to add that to the business side. And so there's your need, and then there's the business need. And this is where people get stuck in. And I want to add a little bit to it, especially if you're in the first few years of business and you have a startup, or you're starting an investment portfolio, or a business, or you're starting a new business. There's a need for the business, for the person who's starting it, for the team who's starting it, for them to take risks. There's no other way for business to move forward. In fact, the reason why not everybody has businesses, very few people do, is because the person who starts it, or the team who starts it, are the ones who are owning the risk. And so that's why they get the higher pay. That's how the whole capitalistic system is structured. Right. Is whoever takes the biggest risk, they get the biggest reward. Now, most people who haven't taken that risk, they will sit there, and including me, there was a time when I would say, it's like, why are these people getting paid so much? Until I started a business, I realized, holy shit, they deserve every penny of it.
Yep.
So going back to it, so your personality profile, or the way your needs are, is that you're looking for certainty and structure, but the business needs risk taking. The business needs pushing forward. And if either you don't have anybody on that team, or you're the one running it and you keep running into that stuff, you don't know what your needs are, you're gonna run into problems, and you're gonna keep thinking, oh, like, there's something stopping me, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. The antidote to that is the why. And again, in our space, that word has been overused and diluted and just kind of taken for face value. Find your why. Yeah, blah, blah. But no, seriously, find your why. And even in my space in particular, purpose is a big deal. I don't lead with this in the boardroom, by the way. Like, I don't lead with, hey, your needs are important. You're a precious little wonderful snowflake. Like, they don't like that. But you find a way to bring these things up through what matters to them and what they're trying to accomplish. And when you can introduce these concepts, then, oh my gosh, it's hunting season. It's great because you can make a lot of progress very, very quickly with people just through the awareness alone. But the antidote in that gap between me personally, I'm this, the business is this, how do I fill the gap? And the gap is spanned with the mission, the purpose. And if I can, the purpose is another one that's people get wrong. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Purpose and passion is not the wonderful, frilly, cool things that you like to do in your spare time. That's not your purpose. That's not your passion. No, it's not. Stop it. Your purpose and your passion is that thing that you will get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning for. That's your purpose. Your purpose is the thing that breaks your heart. That's your purpose. And so when that purpose, I want to feed every child in my community. And you get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, I got some hungry kids here. There was some trouble. They've been remanded. I don't know what to do. I'm on my way. Pancakes, bacon, I'm on my way. I will feed those children because feeding those children is so important to me. Does it matter that I don't like crowds and I don't want significance and I don't want to be in the spotlight and I don't want to be interviewed on the news? Guess what? If it helps me feed children, you bet your ass. I don't care about that anymore because my purpose is I need to feed these children. I don't care how. Okay. So look at your business. Is your business just, I think this will be cool because it'll make me some money and I like money and I want some more? That's not a purpose, bro. That's not a purpose. Your purpose is, I want to do this because it solves this problem, and that problem broke my heart. That problem is something that I think is worthwhile and that I really think I can make a difference in. That's the thing that gets you from, ooh, I don't know if I want to do this, to, hell yes, I have to do this.
Yeah, I love that. There was this one of the common themes that I've seen with spiritual teachers or people who have brought a lot of wisdom to all of human knowledge, to be honest. And one of the common themes they will say is that if you really want to find your purpose, if you really want to find that path, find the contrast of that. And what you're referring is the contrast of that. What
Yeah.
broke you down? What
Yeah.
broke your heart?
Yeah.
What did you struggle with? What did the people around you struggle with? And your life, if you dedicate your life to correcting that, maybe not even for yourself but for other people, you will go above and beyond and all sorts. And I know your story a little bit, and my story is connected to that too.
Yeah.
Is that I was broken, like I shared 20 years ago. I didn't know how to move forward. I saw a bunch of other people being broken. I thought that was just life.
Yeah.
No, that was just a complete breakdown of a family, of a community, of myself, lack of knowledge, lack of skill sets, lack of awareness, lack of leadership that led me there. And now I can't go back, and I'm not the kind of person who blames people for my own stuff. Be like, okay, now I'm an adult. What do I do? Now it's my opportunity. I don't want in the future my kids to look at me in the eyes like, where were you in this stuff? I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'm gonna fix this shit for myself
Mhm.
first, and then I'm gonna do something about this. That wakes me up every day. That's why I'm awake every morning
Yeah.
at 6 in the morning. Not because I have to. I've built a
Yeah.
business at this point where I don't have to. But I wake up. I'm super excited because I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to serve. Like that's most people have no idea what that thing is. When you ask them, "What's your why? What's your purpose?" My family is my purpose. Of course, your biological purpose will be your family.
Yeah.
That's given, and
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But you need to understand the deeper spiritual purpose here, well, that's connected to who you are and that authenticity in your story.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is another kind of coachy kind of phrase, but how are you showing up? My
Yeah.
family is my purpose. My family is my passion. Okay, how are you showing up? Well, I hang out with them. What? Are you demonstrating what it looks like to live fully? Are you demonstrating to them how they can pursue their dreams and how they can become the best versions of themselves? Because what we say means nothing. Emotionally speaking, children especially can't process, can't comprehend the things that we tell them most of the time. They just hear it as words and they're like, whatever. But you know what they understand from day flipping one? Demonstration. That's how they learn to walk. That's how they learn to feed themselves. That's how they learn all that stuff is through demonstration. So if your family is really your purpose and your passion and all that kind of stuff, how are you showing up for them? Are you demonstrating and are you leading from that place?
Yeah. And the point we're bringing up, and it might be your purpose to create a better family, because you might have come from a family that completely broke
Absolutely.
down, and that could be really the thing. But if that is not part of your story and you're saying that, oh, that's just a cool thing to create a better
Yeah.
family, or a cool thing to create an entrepreneurial path, or a cool
Yeah.
thing to become a philanthropist. One of the weirdest answers I get from investors whenever I ask them, like, tell me a little bit about your vision. What would you want to be? And almost like 80% of them, I want to be a philanthropist. Like, okay, tell me, how does that connect to now and in the past? Like, how did you get to that conclusion? They have no idea. They
Yeah.
don't. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean to be a philanthropist? They have no idea. They just heard it over and over.
Yeah.
They think it's a
It's
good thing to be
status.
a philanthropist.
Yep. Yep.
Nothing wrong with philanthropists if they have
Nope.
a purpose associated with it, but it won't be for you.
That's right. We both work with a lot of nonprofits who love philanthropists. This is, did we have a conversation about the Wheel of Fortune example? I
No, we
tell
didn't.
this, okay, okay. I tell this story real quick because when I work with clients and ask, hey, what are your values? What are your needs? That kind of thing. If you watched Wheel of Fortune back in the day and you got to the bonus round, you got 5 consonants and 1 vowel. And back in the day, it was STLNRE. That was it. Everybody picked STLNRE, right? And pretty soon, Wheel of Fortune kind of caught on. And it'd be real easy for them to pick phrases and words and stuff that didn't have a lot of STLNRE. Okay. So now, if you watch Wheel of Fortune today, you get to the bonus round, you step up, and they go, okay, Vanna, show all the STLNREs. And now, contestant, pick 3 more consonants and a vowel. Why do they do that? Because S, T, L, N, R, and E are the platitudes. It's expected. It's the cost of doing business. And so many people live that way, where you ask them, and values is one of those places. Hey, what are your values? Honesty and kindness. And yeah. Like that's the cost of doing business in our society. But what about the other 3 consonants and the other vowel? Like what ones do you really matter to you and really differentiate you? So in so many ways, we all do that and we know the correct answer. And we show up and they say, hey, who are you? STLNRE. Okay, what's your purpose? STLNRE, right? They just give that kind of practice response because those are safe and those are expected and they don't expose us and they don't show any vulnerability.
Yeah, yeah, I see that, and one of the things that I do with my clients is, and I tell them, because all the times, well, isn't that part of therapy? Isn't that part? I don't care what I do. I need to get you to recognize that authentic side of you and quickly get you to find what your mission is, what your purpose is, so you can actually show up as a
Right,
leader in your
right.
personal life, in your profession, whatever that looks like. Our time is
Yep.
very short here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
gonna, like, I had a recent calculation. It's like I have 1,000 weeks left.
Right,
I've, statistically speaking, I don't know what's going
right,
to happen in
right, right,
between,
right.
because I could go tomorrow and I wouldn't know. But let's say, even if you count that, it's about 2,000 weeks, but half of it I'm going to be sleeping. The other half of it, I'm awake, eating, and out of that. Okay, so a
Right,
thousand
right.
weeks left, and this is averaged out at about 83 years old, which is the average statistics for men alive in the Western world. So what the hell am I going to do 1,000? This is running out. Like, I need to do a bunch of stuff. I
Yep,
don't have time for
yep,
unnecessary things, and I need to know myself. Most people are kind of coasting along. Well, I'll do this, I'll do that.
yep,
No, when I work with my clients, I need them to understand where they come from. I
yeah,
need you to make sense of your story. If you're stuck in trauma, if you're stuck in whatever, if you're stuck in victim side, if you don't know who you are and how you're going to show up, it doesn't matter what strategy I give you. It doesn't matter what tools. You're gonna just go the wrong direction. It doesn't matter what KV we. There's a quote I love about fear, is that the treasure, the, oh man, I'm gonna butcher this, but the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And
sure,
one of the comments
absolutely.
came up in my session yesterday, and it was like, he's like, you know what's even scarier is to enter the wrong cave. I'm like, that's what people do. They enter they put all the
Yeah,
effort, they
yeah,
enter the
yeah,
wrong dark cave, they put
yeah,
everything into it. 10 years later, why the hell did I do that shit?
yeah,
That's because you didn't know who you were. And
right,
then I get them to realize what their vision is. What do you want to create long term?
yeah,
What is
yeah,
your life going to be? It's not enough to say, oh, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm gonna try this thing. It sounds like I'm gonna make
right,
more money in this area versus another area, and that's how most people think. So if you don't have that path clarified, I would say stop taking action.
yeah,
Like, go,
yep,
like, figure out what that looks like. Get help or do it yourself. Reach out to one of us, whoever that is. Figure that out, because most people who are going to be watching this are going to be they're going to be in their mid 30s, 40s, 50s, some even 60s. You don't have much time left.
right,
You got to do what you need to do, live your life, enjoy it, and pass on whatever you need to pass on. You don't have
yeah,
time to coast along. If you're operating in a reactionary mindset, if you hear the fears that we're talking about and you're struggling, this is a time for you to seek support. And it doesn't have to be with us. My invite and my challenge to everybody is, seek support in your environment. I don't care if you go to a
yeah,
therapist, a friend, or a mentor or a coach. Get support, because that's when things started changing, shifting for me, for everybody around me. And don't feel like you need to do all of this alone. But I'd love to get a couple of last points from you, and then also share, where can people find you so we can serve them more.
yeah. I mean, the best place, of course, is therealcharlesbrowne.com. You know, I'm sure we can share that link or something. I have a couple of great
Sure.
assessments in there, depending on where you are in your leadership or your peak performance journey. I got a couple of great assessments in there that will give you super actionable steps based on where you are in that kind of performance curve. I'm really active on LinkedIn and YouTube, but otherwise, I keep it pretty simple. You know?
Awesome. Any last thoughts around what we've been talking about?
Yeah, actually, your last little monologue there kind of brought to mind the people who love and care about us the most don't want us to be happy. They don't want us to be successful. They want us to be safe, and bless their hearts for that. But the real kicker to that is they want us to be safe in the way that they define safety. So if there's friction in your life, if there's a gap in your life, if there's a splinter in your mind, it's most likely because you have a set of beliefs that were defined by those people before you actually grew into who you are. I started my journey alone, reading books, watching videos, listening to people, getting myself at least around first base and headed for second before I ever reached out for help. there's plenty that you can do right now today. Watching and listening to us is part of that journey. So keep it up.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely reach out to Charles if you feel aligned with him, you're on a similar journey, and you see that he can support you. Definitely reach out to him, because it will serve you a lot. You will, if you're watching this on Facebook, you will see a banner upstairs above you. If you scroll up, where you can download a PDF, you can go on a journey without even hiring me or anything. You can go through your own journey of figuring out what is affecting you, what are the things that are holding you back, and what is the thing that you need to do to move forward, to connect with that authentic side, so you can manage your fears better. The world will always change. It will be negative, all kinds of negative things that are going to come, things that will push you, challenge you. If you don't know who you are, it doesn't matter what's happening in the world, you're not going to be able to navigate it. And right now, a lot of people are scared in their own world, and like Charles said, they look at fear from external sources, but it starts with you on the inside, because you're the one who has to deal with things. You're the one who has to pivot and navigate and challenge yourself to move forward under the circumstances. You're the one who needs to build the courage to move forward, and that comes from your real side, not your conditioned side, which is the thing that we keep talking about. So definitely go ahead and download that. If you're watching this on YouTube, podcast, and other places, go to faisalensaun.com. You'll be able to download the same PDF. It'll give you a lot of value. Share your thoughts with us. Do you agree, disagree? What are the things that stood out for you? And are there any questions that you might have around this? We could do another episode, or we could both independently do some things for you that will serve you further. We can take this in all kinds of direction, but ultimately it comes down to you. Like, where can we support you? Is there a question you have? Is there an insight that you had that will support other people who are watching this? Because we're not just talking about fear and the abstractions. Like, this affects people in their personal lives as leaders. This affects families, communities, organizations, which affects all of us. And I want to thank Charles for being here with me, spending this time. It was a lot of fun, and we'll continue this in some way.
Yeah, my pleasure. Excellent.
Thank you, Charles. Take care, guys. Bye. If you enjoyed that video, make sure you click on this video or this video. It will serve you to move your growth journey